And as far as the Harvard case method, as we explained in the first week, every business phenomenon, we consider that as a wicked problem in a sense that there are multiple ways to define the problem. And each different way you define the problem actually leads to a different decision as well as action. So it's very important to understand and capture the essence of the wicked problem. We use the case method as the vehicle to help us to understand and define the wicked problem, because case was considered as imitating or simulating the real situation. The real situation could be very massive, complicated, and that's why the case materials you were reading also reads like very complicated and messy, and sometimes you have over-information, lack of information. You have to use inference and to conduct your case analysis as if that's in the real situation. So that's part of this Harvard Business School case method. Try to present you a simulated reality and encourage you to decode this complicated situation and identify the strategic issue to work with that. When we do case analysis, you are expected to do the following. One is to understand the complexity and uncertainty in reality. It's a simulation of reality. Two is to fill out the noise. There were a lot of lack of information or over-information or irrelevant information. It's your job to try to use the case analysis to filter it out. Third is to systematically present the argument on significant issues. And you need to pick that strategic issue and systematically, logically present it to readers. That's part of the work you need to do when you carry out the case analysis. Why we want to do so? Not only because the reality itself is a wicked problem, it's a messy situation, but also we want you to develop these skills and the judgment to perceive the reality effectively and to learn to persuade your audience why the issues you presented is considered very significant. In addition to perceive appropriately and persuade powerfully, and also we want to encourage you to develop the skill to produce a process of decision making and action. So that perceive and also persuade and produce, that's the three levels of skills and judgment we try to use the case method to help you to develop. The good thing about the Harvard Business School case is that we have some cookie cutters. Cookie cutters in a sense that we actually come up with templates already. Templates actually improve our reading efficiency, analytical efficiency. There are 3 templates out of the many, many years of development in Harvard Business School. One is what we call the problem case. Second is evaluation case. And the last one is the decision case. Problem case is referring to you were presented into a situation and in which you see significant outcomes, in which you see significant performance, but you don't know where that comes from. So that's why I repeatedly emphasize problem here, not necessarily bad thing. It's just because we don't know where this performance and where these outcomes come from. It's our job to use the problem case method to figure out what are the causes that leads to this effect. So the problem case, simply put, is a problem is a situation in which something important has happened, but we don't know why it did. The problem case is trying to figure that out. And the problem case we also highlight when you selected the problem, when you explain the problem, that has to be actionable. Why that has to be actionable? Because if it's not actionable, you cannot make any decisions. You cannot take any actions. And then there is no sense to look on this particular problem. So problem case, if it's actionable, you can make a decision, you can work it out, you can evaluate in terms of the performance of the decisions and actions, whether that's getting better, worse, more efficient, less effective, so on and so forth. So that has to be actionable. Evaluation case. We don't do evaluation case in this class. It's a little bit more complicated to the master level, so I thought it's unfair to have my undergraduate to carry out the evaluation case. But you need to know, evaluation case is about evaluation, it's about judgment about the worth, value, effectiveness of performance, act or outcome of some kind. So for this case, you actually come up with your own criteria. This is a set of criteria I want to evaluate this situation, and I need to provide the argument to see this is the right criteria, so to speak. So that's the evaluation case. And for the evaluation case, briefly, we often have a bottom line judgment. We have a bottom line conclusion about this action, and then we come up with the criteria, and we argue on each set of the criteria and to reason why this is the appropriate criteria to apply in this situation. In our case, and in both the problem case and the decision case, we just assume the criteria were accepted already. So we didn't go further on arguing, defending the selection of the criteria. The last case method is called the decision case. It's actually, you can see now, it's built up upon the foundation of problem case and evaluation case. So once you have a strategic issue identified, you need to come up with the explicit decisions and alternatives to see if this is actionable problem, how we're going to solve this problem. Those are the choices. The decision case is based on the problem case. You need to define what is the actionable problem first, briefly, but the focus is on the alternatives. You need to develop those alternatives and argue which one is good, which one is not acceptable, which one is moderate, so on and so forth. So in the process, you can see already you were applying criteria already, right? But you were not arguing, reasoning on, well, this is a criteria I have to defend. You assume that's all accepted. So step 1, step 2, step 3, you can see how Harvard case method helps us to build up a strategic mindset. And for you, when you work on the decision case, your focus is on developing the alternatives and recommend one out of the alternatives. When we reach that stage, we'll talk more on the decision case. But today I want to concentrate on how to diagnose the problem case. So walk with me virtually through the case materials. You pretty much come up with the similar kind of listing as I presented here. That's why we call that a wicked problem, because there are so many aspects, endless issues. That's so tiny, and you cannot read it, I cannot read it, right? So that's always the first step. You jot down all these things that stimulate your attention. You jot down all these different aspects that you consider initially that might be important. That's your first draft in terms of painting. And then you move on to see, well, if I want to have a further understanding of this phenomenon, before you make any judgment on this is a problem I want to work on, before that, hold your intention. You try to categorize this messy situation into the areas, into the groups that start to make sense. So they have some similarity. Those tiny little things, those tiny little aspects, have some similarities by certain kind of criteria you yourself endorsed already. So what you do is you put them into groups. It's like the groups I put here, when I work through those, it could be all related to external, all internal. or marketing, or it might be all relates to the inbound and outbound logistics, or it might be relates to production, so on and so forth. You try to simplify. But your power of simplification is based on thorough understanding, complicated processing of the raw material. Without this, you would not have a simplification process that makes sense. Can you see that? Right? So that's the bridge you have to cross. You can't see, I'm going to jump to the problem immediately, unless you're a genius. And then you go further. See, I'm showing you the process, how to conduct the case analysis. You go further, you knew you're going to put the case analysis into the template developed by Harvard Business School. We knew that has to be efficient somehow. People tested it already. So you knew you're going to put the case analysis into the following, constructing into the following format. You knew out of this clearing, you need to identify one problem only. You're going to vendor that problem to your stakeholders. Promote your strategic issue to your stakeholders. And for that one, how are you going to write it up in a presentation that's powerful, that's persuasive? This is the format. So you have an executive summary. Most of the time, I recommend my students don't write an executive summary until you finish everything. Because it doesn't make sense when you come up with the executive summary first. Again, you can do so if you're a genius. Usually, only when you reach the end of your writing, kind of overall view on this paper, you knew already. You knew better already. This is the most effective way. You go to the beginning, you write the executive summary in a concise way. If you don't try that way, you will find it out. You have the endless page. Continue to write executive summary. You're not writing executive summary. You're writing the whole paper. But you will not realize. So that's a little trick. Keep in mind, whenever in the future you will write an executive summary, don't write until you finish everything. That's a little trick. And then you go problem definition. And then you go diagnosis, and then you break that down into cost-effect analysis. And at the last, briefly, you suggest action. In the process, you are able to incorporate and borrow the concept and the frameworks from the textbook. You do not need to separate the section. See, those are the concepts I'm going to talk about. No, you don't. It's like the wall after the finishing. It's like the rough cut after the finishing. You won't see the rough cut, right? You want to see the column behind the wall, etc. But those concepts and the frameworks, it's like the construction, the structural beams, etc. It's there, but you won't see after you finish the construction. So you should keep that in mind when you go through, but meanwhile, you can incorporate that into your writing. Luke, I tried to provide a complete explanation first, and then I'll answer your question for the videotaping purpose. Is that okay with you? All right, thank you. I see your hand. All right, so problem format, keep in mind, out of the process of understanding the case materials, you're asked to identify one only. You do not need to justify to say, well, I see 5 problems, I'm going to recommend 1. No, don't do so, because you're distracting the readers. Right? You just pinpoint directly, this is a problem, period. I saw students has a tendency to come up with a list. That's your drafting process. It's not your final version. Right? So that's the point I want to emphasize. Again, going back to the process of analysis, you can try and error to use different framework because you don't know which conceptual framework will eventually be the most relevant one. You don't know. It's a process of try and error. In my case, I try external analysis to see how that applies to this messy situation. Works to some extent, but not that much. And then I try internal analysis and to see how that works into the messy situation. That helps a little bit, but not sufficient enough. And I also try the competitive analysis, the ASCA, and try to compare Heineken with the other two companies we mentioned in the presentation too. And then find it out, actually, at this moment, I probably will concentrate more on Heineken itself rather than conducting extensive competitive analysis. So I dropped that framework. I'm describing the process of my thinking with you. You can see, again, it's not immediately come to your mind which concept, which framework you should use at the last. It's a process of try and error. You try it out and to see if it doesn't fit, okay, you drop, and then try it out, you see, well, yeah, it fit a little bit, and you cut a little bit and make it more suitable for the phenomenon you're analyzing. So this is a thinking cognitive process you have to go through. And when we go through this process, then we go to the operational challenge. So you pretty much got the idea, what's the problem I'm going to work it out. You got that good idea already. And you also had some very good points scattering around, centered around that problem. You knew they're all relevant. In your mind, you understand perfectly which point match with which argument. But that's not enough, because you have to think about the readers. They don't know how your mind works. You fill into the gap easily, right? Because you went through all those processes. That's why it's a challenging, and in terms of composing your argument. The last step of your work is try to compose a systematic, logical flow of your persuasive argument in front of readers. Even we didn't go through with you as we described, they will still be able to capture the essence of your argument and buy your points. That's a purpose for developing this skill. So to do so, you need to see, okay, I'm going to structurally categorize them into certain kind of flow, stream of ideas. For example, in this particular case on Heineken, well, I can make a perspective, make an argument along the perspective of value system. So value system allowed me to take in local supplies concerns, competitors standard, and as well as their intermediate supplies at this point, so on and so forth. So that's going to be a basket, allow me to capture the similar kind of issues I want to talk about. And another group, another category I can use, it might be the value chain. So value chain actually capture those nitty-gritty details on the production, on the procurement, on the inbound logistics, on outbound logistics. Okay, now I got the title, I got a label for these small issues, or I can group them together. So on and so forth, you go further refining your argument into this way, and keep in mind, eventually, it's those points you delayed, you decide not to discuss, shows your sharpness, shows the depth of your analysis. What do I mean? What I mean is that eventually you will get more materials. You need to take away the less relevant one. You need to take away those things you like the wording so much, but it's not going to make sense in the context. It's the Michelangelo, people ask him, how could you carve the David out of the stone? He responded, I just take off all these irrelevant parts. So that's what I mean. This is the portion to judge, to see your judgment, to see your skill of analysis. And you go to point 1, 2, 3. You break them down into point 1, 2, 3. This is a policy paper. You don't want to go long list. You have to be selective. And in that point 1, 2, 3, in each portion, you have the logic to link them together, to glue them together. So from point 1 to point 2, point 2 to point 3, you have the logic to glue them together. And then you work on the aesthetic, the beautiful portion, to see how you will create the rhythm, the up and down, to get the attention. So that's a flow of arguments. You probably start with a very non-striking point, and then goes to very serious one, and then goes to a quite unexpected surprise, and allow the people to show the comprehensiveness of your thinking as well as your argument. And that's how you grab people's heart as well as their mind. So that's a beautification process. That's the last stage. You want to work it out to make your presentation more powerful and persuasive. Don't forget, in entire paper, you may want to work on 1 or 2 messages. That's it. If you cannot find that 1 or 2 messages, you knew you are not working hard enough. You didn't get the David out of the stone yet. It's like in marriage, in family, the one message is always going to be, even 100 years, I love you. Period. Right? So you need to get that message. Regardless that goes with a chocolate, goes with a flower, goes with a snack. No, that's brutality. It's always that one message. That's I love you. Period. So for an argument, for a policy paper, that also is required. It's very hard to come up with 1 or 2 messages so clear, so distinctive. When people read through those details, they say, I'm persuaded. I took your message. That's the power of persuasion. I will use the Hannigan case to further elaborate what I mean actionable problem. Because very often I have students come to me to say, what do you mean about actionable problem? That is the problem you will be able to make a decision to take action upon. For example, from visible to valuable. So in the Hannigan case, how can we make this marketing message from visible to valuable? That's actionable. Right? So if we define that's the gap in between their marketing message, that's the strategic problem they need to work it out, which is actionable. Or another example, to grow a new product category, and in addition to a general 100% locally segregated sourcing, and you may want to come up with a new product category, let's say global product, both local and global. So you will be able to combine your insufficiency on locally sourced material into a beautiful slogan, see, a beautiful marketing message saying this is a global, right? That's we are promoting to the marketplace. Again, if you define the problem in this way, you can make decision on it and you can take action on it. So that's what I mean, actionable problem. And another example would be the strategic problem might be a lack of the organizational governance to actually mitigating the conflicting system within the company because they have different standard, they have different system, and the locally sourced and the centralized is a different system. So you need to come up with a governance to mitigate the conflict and to transition to a better system. So if that's the governance issue, you highlight it. Again, that's actionable. That's what I mean, actionable problem. You can make a decision on it, you can take action on it. So therefore, companies will be able to look at the issue and to design strategic management accordingly. Now, once we have all these different problems, in our case, I try to use 3 problems to highlight how we're going to conduct the analysis in terms of the format, in terms of the flow of argument. For example, we can define this as a marketing problem, or we can define this as an operational alignment problem, or we can define this as strategic revisioning problem. I see other wonderful definitions of problem from reading your case analysis. I'm fine with it. I'm just giving you an example that, at least from my perspective, I can pick 3 problems. Again, talking about the wicked problem. It can be all redefined in a different way. For example, if we're working on the marketing problem, how this diagnosis and the cause-effect format works. I saw students struggle on it. I saw students write extensively on diagnosis. 3 pages on diagnosis. No, you don't want to do it. A good doctor of yours, if you go to see a family doctor, he or she will give you very quick, brief diagnosis to see, okay, that's your situation, right? And then the doctor will break that down, diagnosis to see the digestion issue, we think that's why you got stomach ache 1, 2, 3, 4. That's cause-effect analysis. Your doctor don't dump all these diagnoses with the cause-effect analysis in detail to you because your cognitive power, your cognitive strength will not be able to take that much message. So the diagnosis is a brief, it's macro level overview based on what you're going to elaborate in the cause-effect. So in this case, diagnosis for this hypothetical marketing problem could be, there's a problem of marketable value proposition on sustainability. We understand that we need to promote a pure local beer with 100% local sourcing. We can only get no more than 60% local sourcing. Now you see a very concise definition of the problem. You also see the gaps in between. 100%, 60%. When you see gaps, when you be able to specify the gaps, you got an actionable problem because where there's a gap, you will be able to make a decision and fill in the gap by your action. So love gaps, love Kaizen in between that allows you to exercise your decision power and design the action plan. So to break down that diagnosis into cause-effect micro level, one from macro, the other is from micro. The micro level analysis that has to match with the macro summary in the diagnosis. On the cause-effect analysis, you can further elaborate. You see, well, currently where our sourcing system is centralized. This centralized sourcing system have been working for 100 years. And that works because of the efficiency and also that helps to balance the shortage from one region of the raw material and shift it from the other region, so on and so forth. So this is the area you utilize the case material to strengthen your argument, to fill in the gap to see, and that's where this diagnosed issue comes from. And then you go further, you are segregating the sourcing system, you explain, see, well, this is a newly emerged system. We had that for the consideration of the security, to securitize the provision of raw material locally. That makes sense on the security side. We also try to promote that to cut down the cost because shipping and transformation could be reduced. And go further, this is also very important because that in line with our message on sustainability, and that's a strategic, it's more than operational. You go in detail to use the case material to explain what it is at this stage and what it is we're looking forward in the future, where is the gap, and because there's a gap, we can take action, we can make a decision to fill in the gap. You can go further, you see, the gaps in between the current system and the anticipated system, and because of the other value chain issues in terms of production, etc., etc. So that is the relationship between cause-effect analysis and diagnosis. Diagnosis brief, macro. And then cause-effect analysis help you to break that down into 1, 2, 3, so that could be more persuasive with evidence, supported with evidence. Diagnosis could be more opinionated. That's your opinion. If you have no cause-effect to follow up, people will see, yeah, that would be a very beautiful opinion, but I'm not persuaded. So that's why you need to provide the evidence to support, to substantiate your diagnosis. And one more time, that's the relationship between diagnosis and cost-effective analysis. These two sections, many students get confused. I want you to pay attention to. Right? And then you go to the last one, actions. As far as the problem case, I don't want you to spend too much efforts on actions. It's just a matter of you knew the direction you're taking. You show the readers, you knew this is going to be the gap, and in general, we will take these actions to fill in those gaps. That's sufficient enough. But once you go through these things, the diagnosis and cost-effective analysis, once you have a good problem definition, on action it's easy because you see the gap there, you just suggest what to plug in, right? So all the actions has been built into your previous argument already. So that's why when students come to me to say, well, what should I see about action? I knew immediately the student got a problem in definition, in cost-effective analysis. Because if you did well, you have no problem on action. It's just a natural to go to that portion to suggest 2 or 3 action steps. That's it, right? Yeah. And using operational alignment as an example, and I put that in writing. I don't want to reiterate for the sake of time. You can see it's the same point, it's the same format I want to concentrate. And going to the Heineken experience, the third one. If you want to work on the third one, you see the message. If we want to come up with a key message, the key message is actually very clear. There's a gap between corporate level strategy and business level strategy. Corporate level strategy looking for bring a better world. That's corporate level strategy. Corporate level strategy, go for sustainability. That's corporate level strategy. And having more locally segregated sourcing in our entire system so that we're taking care of both the operational issue and the corporate level objectives. That's corporate level strategy. Corporate level strategy looks very good, very fancy, very attractive. The problem is that at the business level, you knew already based on our argument, based on our explanation, marketing has a problem. Procurement has a problem. And production has a problem. Income logistics has a problem. So that's a business level strategy in terms of how to organize the value chain activities, how to organize your relationship with the suppliers. You got a problem. So it's actually break down there between the corporate level and business level. If you want to go to Heineken and in front of the board members to see, I got 10 seconds for you, I knew what's the problem. You got to get that message right? You got 10 seconds. You say, well, there's a breakdown between your beautiful corporate level strategy, which is so worthwhile, significant, and you got lots of crampy, need to work on the business level strategy. There's a gap, period. So you got 10 seconds, you grab their attention. If they're in the business, well, you read the case already, you knew we're in game. And all you need to do is to go to redefine what's the strategic problem for them. For example, they need to see how they can reinterpret the vision. Vision is good, but you need to see how to reinterpret the vision to break that down into operational level so people can work on it. People can improve it. People can gradually move towards the strategic objective you set it up, which is so attractive. And in that sense, you will help them to find out the strategic problem you want to define. In this case, would be interpreting Heineken's tradition and strategic vision in contemporary context, generating meaningful value proposition for marketing, developing corresponding goals for internal actions. So you see 3 features I shared with you before. 1, you see gaps. If there's no gaps, there's no action required, right? 2, you see actionable problem. Actionable problem 1 has to be related to marketing, right? Actionable problem 2 has to be related to internal action in terms of logistics, production, etc. Right? So you see the 3 features I highlighted. to you before. And it's all incorporated into this problem definition. And then you go on to try to explain in terms of the diagnosis, to explain further, you see lots of gaps in between the reality and strategic objectives. And you also want to send the positive message when you compose a policy paper. You don't want to be too negative, because when it's too negative, nobody wants to take action talking about change management. Nobody wants to initiate the change. So you need to highlight that, hey, gaps could be drivers for improvement. That's positive. Gaps could be, well, we got the gaps in the organization, and that could be negative. But you turn that into, that could be a driver for very passionable change management, then that's positive. And revision helps to bridge the past with the future, brewing a better world, right? That's their vision, right? Sustainability, that's their future. Brewing a better world, that was their vision developed in the past. Revisioning will allow us to bridge these two. We're not saying one is good, one is bad. We're saying they need to be reinterpreted, they need to be integrated together. And it's possible, so that's always positive. And then you go on, this is a new opportunity for actionable problems in terms of integrating Hannigan experience, brewing a better world with humanity. So you redefine the marketing message, the value proposition, and turn the sustainability strategy into how to improve the local living with the local supplies. How to see the milestone from 40% to 45% to 50% to 60% towards 100%. So the problem of lacking of 100% local sourcing now tend to be a very dreamable goal for everyone. Because of it's imperfect, that motivates all the stakeholders to participate. And that's what you want, right? As a consumer product company, you want people get motivated to all participate. You don't want to be right. Right worth nothing. Having all the consumers participate, that worth a lot of things. Right? And you want to highlight that this is going to be high tech combined with high touch, human touch. And then you go further to explain, well, technically here is a gap. And there is action. And regional gap, technological gap, cultural gap, operational gap. When you're talking about those gaps, you're preparing for your action item already. So when you talk about action, action 1, action 2, action 3, action 4, naturally it's there. And then potential drivers and how to promote the market awareness, new understanding in the organization. Market awareness external, new understanding organizations internal. So best practice from local partners. We knew we have that case material. We can, not for perfect. There's nothing perfect. We're not seeking for 100% local sourcing. That's just one of the indicators. But for better off, that's everyone can be included. It's inclusive. Break down the new vision into tasks and activities with a timeline for implementation. And then establish milestones and review the process on risks and the revision. So that will be a general 4 action item you can recommend for this strategic problem case. And then for some of the analysis, in my writing, I often add one more in addition to Harvard Business School template. I often add risk and the governance, and just partially because Brad and I did a lot of research on crisis management, on risk management. We thought for contemporary organizations, risk and the risk management you have to consider. So that's why usually we add another half page or 1 page in addition to the template. And risks will be interruption of production routines and cost shortage of raw material supplies, right? So in transition, from centralized to localized, you may have the harvest year, you may have the year that is not getting enough material. Then that's interruption. That's a risk you need to keep in mind. To local resistance from existing and new supplies due to misunderstanding. So we see the case material there for potential miscommunication and misunderstanding. 3, governance. So how to counteract with those risks. So you suggest that we can have governance design a special task committee to authorize to continuous monitoring and cross-divisional coordination. So you suggest the risk, you suggest the governance to take care of the risks. And qualification, you never see never. That you always have a qualification for your analysis just in case something went wrong. It doesn't play out as you expected. So qualification, we might put there would be, we anticipate short-term hiccup requires training and support. Right? So that's how you come up with a policy paper that's well-balanced. Right? And for strategic decision case, we will have a similar kind of elaboration in a few weeks because it's not due yet. But for this part, I want to concentrate on, 1, how the Harvard Business School case method works. 2, when you do case analysis, what's the process you need to go through cognitively? 3, I use Heineken as an example to elaborate to you so you will have a chance to compare and revise to resubmit if you want to. Now I will open up for a few minutes to questions. Any question goes. Yes, Warren.
How much space at the beginning of the paper should you allow for the sort of the explanation of the environment?
Very good question. When you write policy paper, you assume your clients knew the basic situation already. Unless you have something you really want to remind them, you don't go extensive. You don't treat them as primary school students. You treat them as executives. They're supposed to know. They only have that much attention. You want to capture their attention right on the problem, right on the spot. So therefore, the answer to you is that as short as possible.
So we don't have to describe things. We just have to assume that they already know the situation.
That's right. Policy paper, research paper, 2 different styles. In policy paper, you have 3 to 5 pages, double space. Right? You want to grab their attention. You want to make it so powerful in 10 seconds or elevate talk. They knew what you try to say. Say, wow, I never thought about it. Tell me more. Right? So that's what the policy paper for. It's serving different purpose. On research paper, on the literature review, you go from the beginning, once upon a time, and then you go to the end, right? So that's supposed to be comprehensive, systematic. So that's the purpose for research. Good.
For the action plan, does it have to include concepts and theories from the actual textbook and stuff we learn in class?
Again, when you think about concepts and theories, you don't need to intentionally put it there. It has to be there when it's needed. So therefore, if you don't see there's a need to apply the concept and the framework to strengthen up your argument on the action, you don't need to. But if you see it's very relevant, it's just naturally put there.
So what's the difference between problem definition and diagnosis?
All right. The problem definition and diagnosis. The problem definition is very much to frame the phenomenon into certain perspective. That makes sense. Diagnosis is go further to tell this, well, this is where this problem comes from in general. And then cause-effective analysis, I'll tell you is specific where this problem comes from. And action plan will be, well, given what I told you already, you probably sense already, but allow me to elaborate a little bit further. We need to take action 1 to 3. And in our case, we also see, well, there are risks, and this is how you're going to take care of the risk. Good questions. Come on. 1 more or 2 more, then we take a break. All right. No more questions? All right. Okay. So are we on the same page now?